Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Sachit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Salutations to the sage Swami Vivekananda, King of renouncers, the embodiment of existence, knowledge, and bliss, and the destroyer of misery. Good morning, everyone. We will be starting this morning a series on Swamiji's beautiful poem, The Song of the Sannyasin. So I thought before I do anything, I'll read the whole poem, and then we'll start the conversation. Wake up the note, the song that had its birth far off, where worldly taint could never reach, in mountain caves and glades of forest deep, whose calm no sigh for lust or wealth or fame could ever dare to break, where rolled the stream of knowledge, truth, and bliss that follows both. Sing high that note, Sannyasin bold, say Om, Tat Sat, Om. Strike off thy fetters, bonds that bind thee down, of shining gold or darker, baser ore. Love, hate, good, bad, and all the dual throng. No slave is slaved, caressed, or whipped, not free, for fetters, though of gold, are not less strong to bind. Then off with them, Sannyasin bold, say Om, Tat Sat, Om. Let darkness go, the will-o'-the-wisp that leads with blinking light to pile more gloom on gloom. This thirst for life forever quench. It drags from birth to death, and death to birth the soul. He conquers all who conquer self. Know this and never yield, Sannyasin bold. Say Om, Tat Sat, Om. Who sows must reap, they say, and cause must bring the sure effect. Good, good, bad, bad, and none escape the law. But whoso wears a form must wear the chain. Too true, but far beyond both name and form is Atman, ever free. Know thou art that, Sannyasin bold, say Om, Tat Sat, Om. They know not truth who dream such vacant dreams as father, mother, children, wife, and friend. The sexless self, whose father he, whose child, whose friend, whose foe is he who is but one. The self is all in all, none else exists. And thou art that, Sannyasin bold, say Om, Tat Sat, Om. There is but one, the free, the knower, self, without a name, without a form or stain. In him is Maya dreaming all this dream. The witness, he appears as nature, soul. Know thou art that, Sannyasin bold, say Om, Tat Sat, Om. Where seekest thou that freedom, friend, this world nor that can give? In books and temples vain thy search. Thine only is that hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. Then cease lament, let go thy hold, Sannyasin bold. Say Om, Tat Sat, Om. Say, peace to all, from me no danger be to aught that lives. In those that dwell on high, and those that lowly creep, I am the self in all. All life, both here and there, do I renounce. All heavens and earths and hells, all hopes and fears. Thus cut thy bonds, Sannyasin bold, say Om, Tat Sat, Om. Heed then no more how body lives or goes, its task is done. Let karma float it down. Let one put garlands on, another kick this frame, say naught. No praise or blame can be where praiser praised and blamer blamed are one. Thus be thou calm, Sannyasin bold, say Om, Tat Sat, Om. Truth never comes where lust and fame and greed of gain reside. No man who thinks of woman as his wife can ever perfect be, nor he who owns the least of things, nor he whom anger chains can ever pass through Maya's gates. So give these up, Sannyasin bold, say Om, Tat Sat, Om. Have thou no home? What home can hold thee, friend? The sky thy roof, the grass thy bed, and food what chance may bring. Well cooked or ill, judge not. No food or drink can taint that noble self which knows itself. Like rolling river, free thou'lt ever be, Sannyasin bold. Say Om, Tat Sat, Om. Few only know the truth. The rest will hate and laugh at thee, great one, but pay no heed. Go thou, the free, from place to place, and help them out of darkness, Maya's veil. Without the fear of pain or search for pleasure, go beyond them both, Sannyasin bold. Say Om, Tat Sat, Om. Thus, day by day, till karma's power spent, release the soul forever. No more is birth, nor I, nor thou, nor God, nor man. The I has all become, the all is I, and bliss. Know thou art that, Sannyasin bold. Say Om, Tat Sat, Om. Swamiji has written many poems. This is one of the most powerful and one of the most beautiful poems. Generally, we find that he was inspired when he wrote. Some of them terribly inspired. His Kali the Mother, that after he wrote that, he went into some very deep mood. The pen fell from his hand. He fell unconscious of the outer world. But all of them have an interesting history behind them. And this one especially very interesting. And we may also want to ask ourselves the question, how relevant is this for everybody? Yeah? Is this uncompromising about the life of renunciation? So why do we even discuss it with householders for whom it's impossible? And even for us, the modern day monks, it's also impossible. Yeah. But we'll find that if we look at it through the lens of practicality, if we can somehow tone it down a little bit so that we're not watering it down, but we're making it relevant to us, that we'll find that it's of tremendous value and it's something for everyone. This is not just for the sannyasin, it's something for everyone. And when we look at the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, we find that there's so much emphasis on renunciation. I'll mention just two things. Once, someone was discussing what is the main teaching of Sri Ramakrishna in front of a Holy Mother. And they were saying this, Jotoma Totopad, there's many faiths, so many paths to God. This is the main message. And the Holy Mother was a little bit quiet, and then she said, yes, there's something that he taught, but to me, his main message was renunciation. Then another nice incident, Swami Ramakrishnananda, when he was lecturing in what was then called Madras, Chennai, and not many people came. In the very beginning, it was a struggle for him to really build up the work down there. And somebody said to him, Swamiji, everything you say is so much renunciation. Why will people come to hear so much renunciation? And he said, what can I do? This is all that we learned. We learned from Sri Ramakrishna. This is what he taught us. So we can't get around the fact that whether it's external or internal, we can't get around the fact that renunciation is necessary. It's necessary in spiritual life. It doesn't have to be the renunciation of the monk, but it has to be at least that internal. Internal renunciation is the most important for everyone, for the monk also. Whether it's a monk or a householder, we need this type of strong dispassion for the world and passion for God. We always have to remember that they go hand in hand. And not simply that we don't care for the world, but there's something that we're striving to realize. Now, there's a nice little history behind this. We know a little bit about when it was written, and we can guess as to why it may have been written. Swamiji was then in Thousand Island Park, and this is the summer of 1895. He was inspired the whole summer, and this is why the recorded notes of his talks, we call them inspired talks, that he was in a very high mood that whole time. And we're very fortunate that some of these things were recorded, that Mary Funky was there, and she couldn't record everything because she herself says there were times when she was just spellbound and she couldn't even put her pen to the paper. So we don't have everything there. She wasn't a good one, but still, what we have is extremely important. Anyhow, she wrote in her memoirs, one afternoon, when he, Swamiji, when he had been telling us of the glory of renunciation, of the joy and freedom of those of the ochre robe, he suddenly left us, and in a short time he had written his Song of the Sannyasin, a very passion of sacrifice and renunciation. Then Sister Gargi, Marie-Louise Burke, she wrote, Swamiji may have written this now famous poem on the afternoon of July 23rd, the day following his giving of monastic initiations. So this very likely could have triggered that Swamiji, it seems that he initiated all of them, at least with a mantra or something like that, and gave vows of renunciation to 3, including Sister Christine, on July 22nd, the day before this was composed. So very likely he was in that mood. He had given these vows of renunciation, and that would have been something that was so dear to him. We have to remember, Swamiji was a sannyasin to the absolute core of his being. This was the defining feature of Swamiji. We may say other things, that love of all humankind and everything, but he was, from top to bottom, he was a real sannyasin. So this probably was one of the ideas that triggered it. Second thing is that he always had thought of India in his mind, that even when he was in the West, in Thousand Island Park and other things, he always was thinking of the work back in India. And one of the things that he wanted to do there was to start these different magazines. So we know that. And he wanted to represent Hinduism in a very rational way. He wanted to have some magazines in the local languages and also in English. He wanted everyone to have access to these things. So he wrote to Alasinga Paramal. He was one of his most beloved Madrasi disciples, played a very important role in the work in South India and even getting Swamiji to come to the West. He said, if you could start, and this is the beginning of 1895, so just a few months before that, if you could start a magazine on Vedantic lines, it would further our object. So Alasinga, whatever Swamiji said, Alasinga, he would follow. He was very, very devoted to him, so he started to work on that. And on July 27th, 1895, they announced this new journal. It was announced first in the Indian Mirror. They called it the Brahmavadan, later became Vedantikeshari. And it said, the purpose of this weekly journal is to elucidate the Vedantic knowledge based on the sacred Hindu Dharma and to work for mankind's social and moral progress. Now, I'm mentioning all of this because Swamiji took his poem, the Song of the Sannyasin, and sent it to this Alasinga. He wrote, this is probably July 30th, the Song of the Sannyasin is my first contribution for your journal. So it has a very important role to play that way also. Don't feel depressed. Don't lose faith in your guru. Do not lose faith in God. O child, as long as the inspiration and faith in the guru and God is within you, nothing will be able to defeat you. Pay attention to the paper. Make it a great success. So whether Swamiji was thinking about the journal and thinking that he'll send it when he wrote it, or whether he wrote it first under inspiration, then decided to send that, we don't really know. But the poem itself, the actual handwritten poem, there's also a nice story behind that many years later, because they didn't know where it was, the original. He had sent it, in the letter. Many years later, there was a carpenter who was doing some repair work on the cottage in Thousand Island Park, and he found a scrap of paper, and there was the original version of the Song of the Sannyasin, and he understood it was something very valuable, and he kept it very safely until it was given to Swami Nikhilanandaji, who, of course, was in charge of New York at that time and the center. So it was very tremendously valuable thing. I don't know where it is now. It's probably still there, or if it's in the museum. But anyhow, so this is a little bit of the historical background of this composition, the writing of the Song of the Sannyasin. Now, I want to get to that other question. For devotees who have their families, who have their jobs, who have their careers, all sorts of responsibilities in the world, then why go through all of this? Just to make us feel bad that we can't live up to this high type of ideal. And it's not just that Swamiji gave it to those. Remember, he's publishing in a magazine that'll be read by householders. And we find that many of our centers that they recite this. Swami Bhashanandaji in Chicago, he was told, this is what I've heard, he was told by Swami Virajanandaji, his guru, that this should be one of the things that they all recite, and every morning they would recite it, many memorized it. Or Swami Brahmapanandaji, he had it memorized and would always refer to different verses from it and everything. So many of us have memorized this. It's such a beautiful thing. So they had to feel that this is something that was relevant for everyone. Not just for monks, and that this is something that we can all get something from. So anyhow, we have to look at this because some of it is obviously for monks. And what filter do we use so that it becomes relevant for everyone? One thing that we really believe is that every devotee has a little bit of this sannyasin inside, a real devotee. A little bit of this this world is the passing show, that there's something of more substance in life. I remember once I attended a interreligious conference in Los Angeles, and I was talking to one of the Muslim representative. I was asking him about the Sufi tradition, and he said that yes, we may not say much about it and everything, but every real Muslim has a little Sufi inside of him. So we can say that every Vedantist has a little sannyasin inside of him. A little bit of that spirit of renunciation has to be there. So we have this distinction, of course, householder and sannyasin. Swamiji makes a very big point that each is great in its own place. This is one of his lectures from Karma Yoga, and that no one should feel that they're a second-class citizen or they're not living up to the goal. There are different standards and different approaches, and why Mother put some of us in the role of a sannyasin and some of a householder, we don't know. We can talk about our samskaras and everything, but each one is a wonderful ideal, a very high ideal. We don't have to think about anything like that. But somehow for Sri Ramakrishna, he wanted to incorporate the mindset of the sannyasin a little bit into the householder also. We see this very much in some of his householder disciples, especially M. The Mahendranath Gupta, the compiler of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, he really had a great longing to renounce everything. And he was so, we can almost say, envious of those who had not yet married when they came to Sri Ramakrishna and were free to renounce everything, and would have been thrilled if Sri Ramakrishna had given him permission to do that, but Thakur wouldn't do it. Two things. One, he said, you still have a little karma left. But two, it seems that he wanted him to be left as a living example of how one can be both a householder and have the mindset of the sannyasin. Grihi sannyasi. It was really a new type of ideal that Sri Ramakrishna wanted. Generally we have the householder life followed by the life of sannyasa. This is our stages of life and everything, but somehow he felt that those were real devotees, even during this householder stage of life. They also start living like a sannyasi to whatever extent that they can. And we see this in the life of M especially. There were some nights when he would go and just sleep out on the open veranda at the Calcutta University, Senate Hall, along with all of the homeless people, just to feel like Swamiji says, have thou no home. Well, just to feel that just relying on God, not having a roof over the head, to feel what it's like to be a sannyasin. So, especially in the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, this sharp line between the householder and the sannyasin gets very much blurred, and there's a lot of overlap. Other way around too. We're sannyasins, we have a roof over our head. We have obligations and duties and responsibilities in the world, like the householder. So it works both ways. The Bhagavad Gita goes even further when the very, very nice verse, the first verse of chapter 6, when it reverses everything. And so who is the real sannyasin? Not the person who puts on the ochre robe and gives up the ritual and everything like that. The person who can perform all of his or her duties in the world without any attachment to the results. That's the real sannyasin. And ashrata karma phalam karyam karma karotiya sa sannyasi cha yogi cha. He is the sannyasin, or she, and is the yogi. Not niragni. This niragni is someone who doesn't bother with the sacred fire that every householder was supposed to have in the old days. Not cha akriya, and doesn't do all of the ritual. We don't become a sannyasin just by failing to fulfill the obligations of the householder. And the householder who does everything in that real spirit, according to Sri Krishna and Gita, is the real sannyasin. So just to let everybody understand that everything we read in this song of the Sannyasin has relevance. Not to be taken literally, of course, everything, that we sell our house and everything, but it has relevance for all of us. This idea of who is the real sannyasin goes way back. Shankaracharya and his Bhaja Govindam. He has some very nice verses about these phony sannyasins. He says, Udara nimitta bahukrita veshaha. Just for the sake of the stomach, they'll put on this cloth. All different types of things, that they're lazy people and everything. Even during his time. Of course, today also, we have something like that. So, there's this idea of honoring the cloth. We know that there are many people that they'll come. They don't even look to the character of the sannyasi. If he's wearing the cloth, it's an ideal, and they'll bow down before it. Chaitanya Deva, with this incident in his life where he put the Garba cloth on a donkey and bowed down before it, just to show reverence to the ideal. There was a nice story that was told to us at the time of sannyasa. Swami Atmajnanananda, he used to tell the story every year. It's an interesting story that he was attending some function someplace, and they were driving in some nice car and everything, and it was stopped there, and he's in the back seat, and some old woman begging comes. And begging for her, and he says to her, "Don't you see that I'm a monk? Here she has no money, and he's living like a king." Yeah, and then she said, "Oh, I understand." And then she said, "Let me tell you one thing: always honor the cloth." That means that and this was the advice that we got at the time of sannyasa. If we're going to wear it, we have to live up to it. So it's not just others that have to respect the ideal of sannyasa. We also have to respect that ideal. Anyhow, the bottom line is that some of us, through grace, through karma, through whatever samskaras, we lead a life of renunciation. Some lead a life of detachment within the world. But this principle of inner renunciation is the same. That we all have to have that. The sannyasin who is attached is no better than anybody else attached to the ashram. Our Swami Paramahansa, he writes in his letters many times, don't let the ashram become your samsara. Don't let that become your family and your attachment and everything. That we give up one samsara and we take on another. So we have to always be aware of that. So this is, we have to look at the spirit of all of this. And to be very honest, when we look at some of our devotees, we find that their dispassion and their spirit of surrender and reliance on God will be greater than many monks. So just to kind of reinforce this idea that we don't have a two-tier system here. Yeah, if we look at Nag Mahashaya, for example, he was held in such esteem that all the direct disciples would try to make pranam to him. He wouldn't allow it, of course. But he was such a burning fire of renunciation, though formally or technically a householder, not really a householder. Okay, so this is by way of introduction. There are 13 verses in the Song of the Sannyasin, and I want to just take up the first verse today. I'll read it again. Wake up the note, the song that had its birth far off, where worldly taint could never reach, in mountain caves and glades of forest deep, whose calm no sigh for lust or wealth or fame could ever dare to break, where rolled the stream of knowledge, truth, and bliss that follows both. Sing high that note, Sannyasin bold. Say Om Tat Sat Om. Now, the first thing that we notice is that a mood is created. He creates this tremendous mood of renunciation and the feeling of peace and joy that comes from giving up. Now, this is very important because sometimes we hear this word vairagya. It sounds so negative. What is this vairagya? That we don't care for anything. Everything repels us, something like. No, this vairagya is something very joyful. If we really get this feeling of renunciation, then it's just a tremendous thing. When filled with joy, this burning fire of renunciation, that means that we only care for God. We only care for the search for truth, and it brings this peaceful. It's a funny combination that we have this longing and feeling vakulata and everything, but also some type of contentment and peace comes from feeling that now we know what we want and we know what we don't care for and we know what won't satisfy us. So we start to understand that renunciation is in some sense part of the goal. I don't want to say it's the goal. The goal is realization, of course. But on some level, intermediate goal is to get rid of this attachment to the world and to even our near and dear ones. We can love them, but without that clinging. That's the main thing. The clinging to things is what brings this all the misery in its wake. We can love everyone. We have to. It's not meant to be dry. Sri Ramakrishna didn't like this idea of the dry sadhu. Yeah. We remember one time he asked one of his disciples, who do you love? I don't love anybody. He said, what a dry sadhu. What a dry person you are. Yeah. So he prayed, Mother, don't make me a dry sadhu. Yeah. So it's not like that exactly, but still, this clinging we have to be able to give up. So we get this feeling, this mood, that through renunciation alone, that we'll gain something tremendously. This is a beautiful line in chapter 12 of the Gita, Tyagat Shantiranantaram. Through tyaga, through renunciation, through giving up, through letting go, immediately we get peace. And Sri Ramakrishna would tell, he was very fond of the story of the Avadhut, and who had the different animals and forces of nature and everything were his gurus. He had his 24 gurus. And the story of the kite. Kite is some type of huge bird that catches fish, some type of eagle or something like that. And caught a big fish and is flying, looking for some place where he can sit down comfortably and eat the fish and everything. But crows, thousands of crows are following, giving him no peace. Caw, 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 go wherever he goes. Finally, it drops from his mouth, and this Avadhuta is watching, and he sees that immediately the crows leave him. Immediately they leave. And then he said, yes. So Tyagat Shanti, as soon as we can let go, then peace comes. It's not exactly the ultimate goal of realization, but still, we feel that. And we get that sense from this very first verse, that somehow it's clinging to things is the problem. And that we let go, and then we feel ourselves. So even in the household situation, we can feel ourselves somehow in the mountain cave, in the forest and everything's are peaceful. So it creates this mood in the mind. So this is very important, this idea of environment. Now we can take it literally also, and from time to time if we can go to these peaceful places. Especially in India, Swamiji always talked about the Himalayas. That we go to the Himalayas and automatically the mind just soars, just looking at them. I felt that immediately, that just looking at it, how vast and distant, and there won't be a single soul living there, and just the feeling of perfect transcendence that comes from seeing the Himalayas. It's a wonderful thing. Or going to a deep forest where everything is calm and quiet and peaceful. So this is why Sri Ramakrishna said, every once in a while, try to go into some solitary place. So that will give us that feeling that leaving all of our worries behind, at least temporarily, and spending some time in solitude. How Thakur talked about solitude so much, that we can just forget the world for the time being, and we can focus deeply on that inner reality and focus deeply on what's important, what we really want to get out of life. So Sri Ramakrishna, he told all of his disciples, householders, almost we could say particularly householders, that it was good for them every once in a while, for as long as possible, even if it's only a single day, to go out of the family environment, find some peaceful, quiet place. If it's a beautiful place, then even better, because nature can work on the mind. That we go to a place with beautiful scenery and everything, that we feel very peaceful about that. So this is our way of learning how to live in the world without being attached to the world. This is the whole point of it. We have so many examples of live in the world like the lotus leaf in the water. If you ever try to take water and throw it on top of the lotus leaf, it rolls off. Other leaves, it'll stay and everything, but there's some texture to the leaf, some of the petals, somehow the leaf, that it'll just roll off. So this is that ideal that we're trying to gain, and we get it through this solitude, that things will roll off our back, that they won't affect us the way they used to. And the mind can become calm and peaceful, which really should be its nature. It should be its nature. What Sri Ramakrishna says is that the mind has become mixed up with the world, that somehow it's like milk and water. They're all mixed up together. What we have to do is to be able to separate everything, then turn the milk into curd and the curd into butter. The butter can float in it, and it won't mix with the water. So this is what we're trying to do by going into solitude, doing a little bit of intense spiritual practice at that time. So any retreat where we go into a beautiful forest area or any secluded remote place, that this will have a tremendous effect on the mind. And that natural joy, that natural beauty we see outside will bring out the joy of the interior beauty. Somehow it can awaken all of that. Now, what are the other benefits that come from simply removing ourselves and going into some nice place in solitude or something. Swamiji talks about this 3 different things that we're trying to become free from. Kama, lobha, mana. He doesn't use the terms exactly, but lust or desire, greed, pride, name and fame. All of these different things that in that line he says, whose calm no sigh for lust or wealth or fame could ever dare to break. Now we talk about all of these different passions, and we talk about these deep-seated samskaras that we have, and how hard it is to try to work these things out psychologically, all of these things. But there's a very simple truth that if we remove ourselves from that environment, then at least for the time being, they won't disturb us. It's a very important idea that sometimes we think that, oh, that's silly, that it's just a temporary thing, we'll go back, everything will be exactly the same. But we remove ourselves from that environment, and then we find that there's a whole chain of things that usually happen that don't happen. In the Stita Prajna section of Gita, the very famous couple of verses that we refer to all of the time, that traces all of these things back to the mind dwelling on a certain object. Being in that environment and thinking about it, that we think about all of these objects of desire, and then desire arises. We don't think about it, it won't arise. Does that mean it'll disappear? Maybe not overnight, but if we get into the habit of redirecting the mind, then it'll be, it's not rooting out these samskaras, it's that we're no longer watering them. There's a plant that you don't water, it'll eventually die out. So this is another very important idea, that the environment triggers all of these passions and everything. And this is why Sri Ramakrishna talks so much about keeping holy company and hedging around the small plant, the tree, so that it doesn't get gobbled up by goats and cows and everything, and until we become strong through all of this. So for the future monastic disciples, Sri Ramakrishna was very, very strong. We wonder why so much of this not keeping company of women. They're young, they're maybe late teenagers, something like that. Just because of this, the tendency of the mind to be triggered by our environment. And so Sri Ramakrishna says that you may be perfectly pure, you may be keeping the company of women who are perfectly pure, and yet the nature of the mind is like that. That lust can come up even in a lustless person. So for the future monastics especially, but for everyone, Thakur really felt that we have to be very cautious about the company that we keep, the things that we read, the movies we go to, all of the things, especially the company that we keep. That either we're going to allow these samskaras to have free reign, or we're going to be able to control them, because everybody has these. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, all of these. This is what it means to be a human being. We all have them to a certain extent. This is the difference between people. Some anger and greed and things are out of control. Other people, it's not too much. But we're human beings, so we have these things. And environment plays a key role in whether these things get out of hand or whether they become under our control. So this keeping holy company and giving the mind good, positive things to think about, pure, holy things, is extremely important. Living alone, also going into solitude, we start to understand what it is, what is the source of joy and happiness within. We live in the world, and it's so natural for us to assume that it's possessions, that it's the objects that we have, the money that we have, the things, the nice clothes we have and everything. we go into solitude and we realize that, no, that really doesn't make any difference. I always think that how much we worry about what we look like, that what clothes we're wearing and how dressed up and everything, and hair is neatly combed and everything, that if we live alone, none of this comes up at all. We start to understand that we're that divine presence within looking outward instead of everything reversed. We live in the company of people, and we're aware of everybody looking at us. When you look at me, what are you looking at? You're looking at this body. Huh? I spend some time alone. I start thinking of myself as that consciousness in which the whole world exists. So this solitude and everything, this will get rid of a lot of these other problems. We spend some time there, and this desire for wealth and possessions and everything, we'll realize that this is just, we're being fooled into thinking that this is the source of joy and happiness. Now, is there no joy in having some nice things? Yeah, there is. But we'll lose them, and it's temporary, and it's misguided, and it's not the real source of joy. But still, we're not puritanical in Vedanta. We're not the Puritans. They wouldn't allow anything. Oh, you can't have any nice things. We can have our nice things, but no attachment. That's all. And we shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking, no, I'll keep getting nicer cars and bigger houses, but I won't be attached. Yeah. That this little bit of external renunciation has to be there in the form of moderation for the householder, in the form of moderation. So anyhow, we start to understand this very strange thing that the less we have, the happier we are. A very strange thing. And maybe it won't come to everybody. Maybe this is why some people take to monastic life. But I remember I spent 1 year in India where I had the opportunity to attend all of the classes of Swami Lokeshwaranandaji. And once a week he had a gospel class. And there was one line that he quoted over and over again. It was, having nothing hath all. Having nothing hath all. And I tried to find a source for this. There's something in the New Testament, as having nothing and yet possesses all things. And then some other things, Lord of himself, though not of lands, having nothing hath all. Anyhow, it's a beautiful idea that we have something, then it's limited. We don't have anything, we have God to hold on to, nothing, a small thing, but there's a joy that comes from having no possessions. I don't know how to explain it. Huh? There's a joy that comes. Sometimes we throw out things, we feel, there's a great freedom. Huh? We have a closet full of clothes that we don't wear, that are old and everything, and we get rid of it. We just feel some burden has been lifted from us. So all of this is the mindset of the Sannyasin, and all of this comes as a result, not exclusively, but with the help of going into solitude. Now, the last thing that Swamiji mentions here is fame, and this desire for recognition, the desire for praise. This is something that the sannyasin can suffer from equally as much as anybody, and sometimes more so because people make such a fuss over sannyasins, constantly praising us and everything. So it's a challenge for many, and we see many sannyasins, they become egomaniacs, and they expect everybody to do everything and bow down before them and everything. The greatest example to me of someone who had the greatest possible fame and acclamation and didn't care for it at all was Swamiji. That how, when he went back to India, no one was ever received in India the way Swamiji was. No one ever got that type of reception where just they would throng to him and unhitch the carriage and pull it and everything. And we know it was just a tremendous thing. And Swamiji didn't like these things. He didn't care for these things. He was perfectly free from that. There's a beautiful incident that took place after Swamiji came back from the West, I think from his first trip when he came back from the West. It was recorded by one of his disciples. I don't remember who it was, but the disciple writes that he saw Swamiji pacing back and forth in his room, and he was reciting a Sanskrit verse. He must have done it over and over again. It's a well-known verse. I don't know where it's from. It has different versions of it, but it says, Abhimanam Surapanam. Does anybody know this verse? Huh? Gaudavam Gaudarauravam Parishta Shukrivishta Trayam Tyaktva Sukhi Bhavet. It's a very beautiful verse that says that pride is the same as drinking alcohol. We get drunk. We get drunk with this pride. Go to them. People showing us honor, praising us and everything. It'll sound to us like these pitiful cries of people burning in hellfire. It's very strong language, huh? And then parishta means a high position. See, Swamiji came back. What's the first thing he did? Turned everything over to Swami Brahmanandi. That you'll be the president. I don't want that. So this position is like the droppings of a pig. And then it says, renounce all of these and be happy. So he was amazed. He heard Swamiji reciting this verse, pacing back and forth. And he thought, how the people are mad to get this type of praise from other people, and how he looks upon it as absolutely nothing. It's something to be given up. And if we can give it up, then we can be happy. So this is that beautiful idea of being free from this desire for praise. Praise and blame. If people praise us, they'll blame us also. They'll criticize us also. We know that. And what does it do? It just increases the ego. There's nothing gained by it. So this is one of the reasons why really genuine monks will hide themselves and will try to stay away from people and everything, and won't care for getting thousands and thousands of disciples bowing down at their feet and doing all sorts of things like that. So we end this first verse with the positive aspect of all of this. This is a little bit negative first. We're trying to remove ourselves from all of this. But then the stream of Brahman flows in the form of Satchidananda. So we feel definitely, we get rid of attachment for these lower things, and automatically we feel that joy that comes from within. And this gives us a little taste of the joy that comes without any external thing causing it. We may say, oh, beautiful nature and everything. That just gives us the sense of transcendence, the sense of the real nature of the self. Then we end with, sing high that note, Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. This will be the common theme through all of this. Om Tat Sat Om, this is really just a way of saying that this ultimate reality, this Brahman, what we call Brahman, ultimate reality, is something beyond everything, something transcendent. There's the word tat, is very interesting. It's like our English word that. T-A-T, T-H-A-T, like that. It can't be given, it's not a male, it's not female, it's nothing that we can see, it's just that which we can just point to as that unknowable reality, which is our very own self. Om Tat Sat Om. So just always remind yourself that you are that this is the ultimate goal, and this is why we take to this life of renunciation, internal or external. So I think I can stop here, and yeah. Anyhow, this is the beauty of this poem, that it's for the sannyasin in particular, but for all of us. We all have to have a little bit of this spirit of renunciation. It goes hand in hand, the longing for realization and this passion for the world. And they both have to be done at the same time. We have to keep lessening our clinging to the world, but we do it mostly through this longing for something higher and something deeper. So we will stop here and then continue next month. This will take several different sessions. We won't go through everything word by word like this, but okay, so let us sit for a few minutes and let the mind dwell on this mood that's created by this beautiful poem.